The grand ballroom of the Astoria Hotel hummed with the electric current of high society. Crystal chandeliers draped light onto a sea of tailored suits and silk gowns, the air thick with the scent of lilac and expensive champagne. This was the heart of the city's power, and tonight, it beat for one man. Hank Larson, CEO of the Larson Group, hidden in a shadowed alcove. Lillian smoothed the lapels of her starkly elegant pantsuit, her presence a quiet disruption in the glittering chaos. Whispers followed her like a shadow, the name ethereal spoken in tones of awe. The genius designer, back from a 7-year exile, had just signed a contract with Larson Group so lucrative it had shaken the foundations of the fashion world. Lillian adjusted her hold on the small, restless girl in her arms. 5-year-old Lily, whose dark eyes mirrored her own. Her gaze swept the room, not for admirers, but for a ghost. And then she heard it. A snippet of conversation carried on a wave of laughter from a nearby cluster of guests. Can you believe it? Hank Larson, finally tying the knot. And with Luna Vance, of all people, her designs have been Larson's cash cow for years. A cold dread, sharp and familiar, called in Lillian's stomach. Lena, her sister. The name was a shard of glass under her skin. So, the rumors were true. The man who now controlled her professional destiny was engaged to the woman who had stolen her past. The irony was a bitter pill, one she had been swallowing for 7 long years. She had returned for one reason: to reclaim her mother's legacy, the design house Luna had usurped. Working for her sister's fiancé was a cruel twist of fate she would have to endure. Mummy, look. Lily's small voice pierced through her thoughts. The child squirmed, pointing a tiny finger across the polished marble floor. It's him, from the picture. Before Lillian could react, Lily wriggled free from her arms. A flash of white tulle and determined little legs, she darted into the throng, weaving through startled guests with the single-minded focus only a child can possess. Lillian's heart leapt into her throat. Lily. No, but it was too late. Lily had reached her target. Hank Larson, tall and imposing in a custom Zegna suit, was mid-conversation when a small body collided with his legs. He looked down, his brow furrowed in confusion, as the little girl wrapped her arms around his knee and looked up with wide, hopeful eyes. The room fell into a stunned, collective silence. Daddy, Lily's voice, clear as a bell, echoed in the sudden quiet. I finally found you. Hank stared, utterly bewildered. He saw a child with hair as dark as his own, and eyes that held an unnerving familiarity. He felt the jolt, a strange, phantom sensation of connection that made no sense. He knelt, his movements automatic, his gaze fixed on the girl's face. I'm sorry, little one, he said, his voice softer than he intended. I think you've made a mistake. No mistake, she insisted, a grip tightening. You look just like the man in Mommy's locket. Mortification washed over Lillian in a scalding wave. She pushed through the parting crowd, her face flushed. I'm so sorry, Mr. Larson, so sorry. She gets carried away. She reached for Lily's hand, her own trembling slightly. Come on, sweetie, let's not bother the man. As Lillian pulled her daughter back, her eyes met Hank's. For a dizzying second, the world tilted. His gaze, sharp and analytical, softened with a flicker of something else. A question, a ghost of a memory he couldn't quite catch. He looked from the child's face to Lillian's, noting the same delicate curve of the jaw, the same stubborn set of her chin. He felt the forgotten ache, a whisper of a night lost to whiskey and grief years ago. Who was this woman? It's no bother, he managed to say, his voice strained. That Lillian was already retreating, melting back into the shadows with her daughter in tow, leaving him kneeling on the floor, the center of 100 curious stares, with the phantom scent of her jasmine perfume lingering in the air. Later that night, The clinical elegance of Lillian's minimalist apartment felt like a sanctuary. She paced the living room, a glass of untouched wine on the coffee table, while her best friend Morgan watched from the sofa. "You have to admit, it's a hell of a way to meet your new boss," Morgan said, trying to inject some levity into the tense atmosphere. Lillian stopped pacing, her hands clenched. "He's not just my boss, Morgan. He's the man engaged to Luna, the woman who built her entire career on the designs she stole from me. The designs I was working on the night my mother, her voice broke. The memory still raw. The night my mother died in that accident." Morgan's expression softened. "You still think Luna had something to do with it?" "I don't think." "I know," Lillian said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "She drugged my tea that night. She stole my portfolio. The police report said my mother's car had faulty brakes, but she had it serviced the day before. It doesn't add up." She finally met Morgan's gaze, her eyes blazing with a cold fire. "I didn't come back just to design clothes, Morgan. I came back for the truth. I came back for justice. And I will burn down anyone who stands in my way, especially my dear sister." Unseen by the two women, a bedroom door creaked open. In the hallway, four small figures were huddled around a laptop, its screen casting an ethereal glow on their faces. Mike, Lily's twin and a prodigious tech quiz, typed furiously. "Okay. I'm in," he whispered, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Larson Group's main server. "Their security is like a paper towel. Is it time, Mikey?" Lily asked, peering over his shoulder, her early outburst forgotten in the thrill of the new mission. Mike grinned, the expression eerily adult on his 5-year-old face. "It's time," with a few final keystrokes. He bypassed firewalls and triggered a system-wide alert. He typed a short, simple message and embedded it into the core code, setting it to flash across every screen in the corporation's network. Miles away, in the penthouse office of the Larson Group Tower, Hank nursed a tumbler of scotch, the image of the woman and the child still haunting him. Suddenly, alarms blared. The bank of monitors on his wall, displaying global market data, flickered and died. They were replaced by a single, childish scrawl, written in a bright, garish font, "Stinky Daddy, you're a father." The message repeated, a digital taunt that sent the entire company into chaos. Phones rang off the hook. His tech team was in a panic. The breach was costing them millions by the minute. Hank stared at the screen, a muscle ticking in his jaw. This wasn't a corporate attack. It was personal, sophisticated yet bizarrely juvenile. "Find them," he snarled into his phone, his voice a low growl of controlled fury. "I don't care what it takes. Find out who did this, now." He slammed the phone down, oblivious to the fact that the architects of his corporate nightmare were currently being tucked into their beds. Their mission to disrupt their stinky daddy's engagement a resounding success. The grand ballroom of the Larson Grand Hotel glittered, a universe of crystal and champagne. At its center stood Luna Vance, radiant in a couture gown, basking in the glow of flashing cameras and fawning praise. "A true genius," a society columnist gushed, gesturing to the sleek, minimalist designs projected on a screen behind the stage. "Luna, your vision will redefine the Larson brand," Luna preened, her hand linked possessively with Hank Larson's. He stood beside her, a stoic, impeccably tailored statue, his expression unreadable. Just as the master of ceremonies was about to officially announce the engagement, the ballroom's towering oak doors swung open with a resounding thud. A hush fell over the crowd. A woman stood silhouetted in the entrance, her presence commanding the cavernous space. "Forgive my tardiness," she said, her voice a cool, clear melody that carried through the silence. "I wouldn't miss celebrating the success of my protege." As she stepped into the light, a collective gasp rippled through the room. It was Lillian, her simple, elegant black dress was a stark contrast to Luna's frothy confection. But it was her face older, sharper, yet undeniably the same that struck a chord of disbelief. Luna's smile froze, her face draining of all color. It was like seeing a ghost. Lillian glided through the parted crowd, her eyes locked on her sister. "Hello, Luna. It's been a long time. 7 years, isn't it?" She stopped before the stage, her gaze a physical force. "You've done so well for yourself. I almost didn't recognize my own designs up there on the screen. You've added your own touch." "I see." The accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Whispers erupted. Luna, momentarily paralyzed by shock, finally found her voice. "Lillian, what are you doing here? How dare you ruin my special day with your lies, lies." Lillian's laugh was soft, but it cut through the murmurs like a shard of glass. "I believe the only lies here are the ones you've been living." She raised a small remote. "I think it's time everyone saw the real genius designer queen." With a click, the projections of Luna's designs vanished, replaced by a grainy video on the massive screen. It showed a younger Luna in a hotel room, laughing with a man who was clearly not Hank Larson. The audio was damning. "He has no idea," Luna's voice echoed through the ballroom, dripping with contempt. "He thinks these sketches are mine. By the time that fool Lillian realizes I've stolen her entire portfolio and her fiancé, I'll be Mrs. Hank Larson." The video ended, plunging the room back into a stunned, horrified silence. Luna stood as if turned to stone, her perfect facade shattered into a million pieces. Then, the screaming began. "It's fake, it's photoshopped. Lillian, you witch. You always were jealous of me." Throughout the chaos, Hank hadn't moved. His expression remained placid, but his eyes were like chips of ice. He slowly detached his arm from Luna's frantic grip, leaning into the microphone. His voice was calm, steady, and utterly devastating. "Disengagement," he announced, his words echoing with chilling finality. "Is cancelled." He turned and walked off the stage without a backward glance, leaving Luna to collapse in a heap of white tulle and public humiliation, her denials lost in the roar of the scandalized crowd. An hour later, the sterile silence of Hank's penthouse office was a world away from the pandemonium below. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Indifferent, Hank stared at the document on his mahogany desk, the crisp white paper a stark contrast to the dark wood. "Paternity test results." He'd read the words a dozen times, yet they still felt unreal. "Subject A, Hank Larson. Subject B, Lily Vance. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. Lily." The fiercely intelligent, bright-eyed little girl who had marched up to him in the park and declared him her father. He was a father. The realization was a tremor that ran through him, unsettling foundations he didn't know he had. The woman from that night 7 years ago, the one he could barely remember through a haze of grief and whiskey, had been Lillian, and she had given birth to his child, hiding her from him all this time. The mystery of her deepened, twisting with a new, sharp sense of betrayal and a confusing, undeniable longing. "Is intercom burst, sir? Miss Vance is here. Send her in." Lillian entered, her composure from the party replaced by a wary tension. She clutched her purse like a shield, her eyes darting around the imposing office before settling on him. Hank didn't rise. He simply slid the paternity report across the polished desk. "Explain this." Lillian's gaze fell to the paper. A flicker of panic crossed her features before she masked it with defiance. "It's a piece of paper. What's there to explain?" His voice was dangerously low. "You disappeared for 7 years. You let me believe you vanished off the face of the earth, while you were raising my daughter in secret. Why?" The anger he'd suppressed was finally seeping through. laced with a hurt that surprised him. The cold CEO was gone. In his place was a man who had just discovered a fundamental piece of his life had been a lie. Lillian's guard was up. "She's my daughter, Hank. I've taken care of her. You were busy building an empire and getting engaged to my sister. The sister who stole your life's work." He countered, his eyes boring into hers, trying to decipher the woman before him. "You come back, expose her, and drop this bomb in my lap. What is your game, Lillian?" She flinched, caught off guard. Her mind raced, a frantic calculation of how much he knew, how much he could find out. 1 child was a shock. 5 would be a catastrophe. She couldn't let him get any closer. "There is no game. I came back for my mother's company. For what Luna stole, Lily, was an accident." The word accident struck him like a physical blow. "She is not an accident," he stated, his voice turning hard as steel. He stood, towering over her, closing the distance between them. "She is my child, and I will not allow you to hide her from me a moment longer. I'm bringing Lily home." Lillian's breath caught in her throat. "You can't." "I can, and I will," he pressed, his gaze unwavering. "This changes everything. I'm going to find out exactly what happened 7 years ago, Lillian. And I'm going to find out every single secret you're trying so desperately to keep." The air in the Simpson family home was thick with the scent of lilac and resentment. The next day, sunlight streamed through the grand, 2-story windows, illuminating dust motes dancing over furniture that looked more like museum pieces than fixtures of a home. Luna paced the marble floor, her silk robe trailing behind her like a battle standard, her face a mask of fury. Her mother, Martha, sat primly on a velvet settee, her expression a mirror of her daughter's cold anger. He chose her sigh, Luna seed, her voice a venomous S. In front of everyone, Hank chose that tramp and her litter of bastards. "Language, dear," Martha chided, though her eyes held no warmth. "The paternity test is a problem, but not an insurmountable one. Hank is a man of honor. He feels a duty to his children, not to their mother. Your engagement is your leverage. We just need to remove Lillian from the equation permanently." Just as Luna was about to respond, the heavy oak doors to the living room swung open. Howard Simpson entered, his face grim. He wasn't alone. In his hands, held with a grotesque reverence, was a polished mahogany box. Lillian's breath caught in her throat. She had followed them here, knowing a confrontation was inevitable, that this was a desecration she hadn't anticipated. It was a mother's urn. The sight of it in his hands, wielded like a weapon, sent a shard of ice through her heart. "Lillian," Howard said, his voice devoid of paternal affection. He placed the urn on the gleaming grand piano, a centerpiece in a macabre display. "We need to talk." Luna's lips curled into a triumphant smirk. This was her mother's plan, a masterstroke of cruelty. "What have you done?" Lillian's voice was a fragile whisper, all the fight draining from her as she stared at the container holding all that was left of her mother. "I've secured your mother's legacy," Howard said, his tone steeped in false righteousness. "Something you seem intent on destroying by dragging our family name, and the Larson name, through the mud." He stepped between Lillian and the urn, a human barricade. "You will resign from Larson Group. You will take your children and you will disappear again. If you do, your mother can finally rest in peace. If you don't," he let the threat hang in the air. A pose now filled the room. The weight of their manipulation pressed down on Lillian, threatening to suffocate her. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to scream, to call that precious box from their profane grasp. But she saw the trap. They wanted her to become hysterical, to prove their narrative that she was unstable and unfit. They were using the one pure thing she had left to break her. For a moment, she felt the familiar pull of despair, the same crushing helplessness that had driven her away 7 years ago. her vision blurred with tears, her hands trembling. Luna watched her, gloating. It's for the best, Lillian. You were never meant for Hank's world. Just sign the resignation letter, and we can all move on. Think of it as your final duty to Mother. The word duty was a slap in the face. It cut through the grief and sparked a fire in her soul. Her mother hadn't wanted this. Her mother had fought for her legacy, for her share in the company her genius had helped build. To run away now wouldn't be honoring her memory. It would be spitting on it. Lillian straightened her spine. The tears receded, replaced by a glacial calm. She lifted her chin, her gaze shifting from the urn to her father's eyes, then to Luna's. The raw pain in her expression hardened into something impenetrable, something they had never seen before. Fine, she said, her voice clear and steady. The single word stunned them into silence. Luna's smirk wavered. Howard's brow furrowed in confusion. This was too easy. I will resign from Larson Group. Lillian continued, her tone deliberate and sharp. I will agree to your terms. A wave of relief washed over Luna. Good. I knew you'd see sense. On to conditions. Lillian cut in, a voice ringing with newfound authority. She took a step forward, her presence suddenly commanding. First, you will hand over my mother's ashes, right now. They will not spend another second in this house. Howard hesitated, but the finality in her tone was absolute. He looked at Martha, who gave a subtle, impatient nod. Getting rid of Lillian was the prize. And the second condition? He asked. Wary. My mother's shares, Lillian said, her eyes locking onto his 30% of Graham Group. It was her inheritance, her work. It belongs to me. You will sign the transfer agreement today. The demand was an explosion in the quiet room. Howard's face turned purple with rage. Absolutely not. That's absurd. You think you can just walk in here and blackmail us for a fortune? It's not blackmail, Lillian countered, her voice dangerously low. It's restitution. You've been profiting from her legacy for 7 years while I was gone. It's mine by right. We'll give you money. A settlement, Martha interjected, seeing the deal slipping away. A generous one. I don't want your money, Lillian said, her gaze unblinking. I want what is mine. Don't you dare, Father, Luna hissed, grabbing Howard's arm. Her panic was palpable. Don't let her ruin this. Hank is almost mine. Give her what she wants. Give her the stupid shares so she finally be gone. The desperation in his favorite daughter's voice was the final push. Howard's greed was legendary, but his desire to see Luna marry to Hank Larson to secure the Simpson family's future through that powerful alliance was stronger. He stared at Lillian, a woman he no longer recognized, and saw the cold, unyielding resolve of her mother staring back at him. Defeated, he gave a curt, angry nod. Draft the papers. Within 2 hours, lawyers were summoned, documents were drawn, and signatures were affixed. Lillian watched, her expression unreadable, as the pen strokes made her a majority shareholder in her family's company. With the signed and notarized transfer agreement secure in her bag and the precious mahogany box held tightly in her arms, she felt a profound shift inside her. They thought they had won. They thought they had bought her silence and her absence. They had traded a piece of their empire to secure a marriage alliance, blind to the true value of what they had just given away. A small, triumphant smirk touched Lillian's lips as she walked out of the house, not looking back. Their obsession with Hank had armed her for the war to come. She pulled out her phone, her fingers steady as she dialed the number for Hank's personal assistant. They wanted a resignation. She would give them one they would never forget. The sharp, insistent buzz of the doorbell sliced through Lillian's apartment, a sound as unwelcome as a siren. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It couldn't be. Not him, not here. Peeking through the spy hole confirmed her fears. Hank Larson stood in the hallway, his powerful frame filling the small lens, his jaw set with a look of unnerving determination. Lillian's mind raced. The quintuplets, if he saw them all, her carefully constructed world would shatter. She had to get rid of him. She pulled the door open a crack, her body wedged in the opening. "Mr. Larson." "What a surprise. We need to talk," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the cheap wood of the door. He made a move to enter, but she didn't budge. "Now's not a good time," she said, forcing a brittle smile. "The kids are napping, and the digital lock is acting up. I seem to have forgotten the password. I'm locked out myself. Can you believe it?" A bead of sweat trickled down her temple. It was a pathetic lie, and she knew it. Hank's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion clouding his handsome features. He was a man who dismantled lies for a living. Hers was practically transparent. Before he could challenge her, a small voice piped out from behind Lillian. "Daddy, that's not our door. Ours is the one with the sunflower sticker." Lillian froze, her blood turning to ice. Lily, ever the helpful innocent, squeezed past her legs and into the hallway, pointing a tiny finger at the apartment next door. "See?" Hank's gaze dropped to the little girl, then followed her finger to the correct door, which now stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, another small face peered out, a boy with the same deep-set eyes and serious expression as Hank. "Daddy?" the boy Flynn asked, his voice laced with a child's pure and complicated recognition. The air crackled with a sudden, suffocating tension. Hank's stare shot from Flynn to Lily, then back to Lillian, his confusion melting into a dawning, horrified comprehension. He strode past her, pushing the correct door wide open. The scene inside was one of domestic chaos and impossible truth. 3 more children, all with features that echoed his own, looked up from their toes, their eyes wide with curiosity. 5. There were 5 of them. Lillian. Hank's voice was dangerously quiet, a storm gathering on the horizon. "Explain this." She had no words. What could she say? How could she explain 7 years of silence, of hiding his children from him? "It's not what you think. I was the victim here." "A victim?" He laughed, a short, bitter sound devoid of any humor. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a folded document, tossing it onto the small entry table. It was a paternity test. Flynn's name was printed at the top. "I did this after I met Lily. I had a hunch." But this, he gestured around the room, his hand shaking with a rage he was struggling to contain. "This is a conspiracy." His confusion had finally given way to a fierce, protective anger, not just at her deception, but at the years he had lost. "I was going to tell you," she whispered, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. "When?" he demanded, stepping closer. "When they were 18. When you needed more money." He saw her flinch, and his expression hardened into a corporate mask. He reverted to what he knew best. "Transactions. Fine. Name your price. I'll give you enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. But the children come with me." Lillian's head snapped up, a fire igniting in her eyes. "They are not for sale," she hissed, her voice trembling with maternal fury. "They are my children. I carried them. I raised them. I protected them every single day for 7 years. You want to take them away from me? I'm telling you, no way." Hank stared at her, momentarily taken aback by the ferocity of her refusal. The words of his assistant echoed in his mind. "Sir, a checkbook can't buy a family. Maybe try offering them a father's love." He looked past Lillian's defiant stance to the 5 pairs of eyes watching them. A silent, miniature jury. The anger in his chest warred with a new, unfamiliar ache. He knelt, bringing himself to their level, his expensive suit creasing on the worn linoleum. "What are your names?" he asked, his voice softer now, stripped of its corporate edge. One by one, they answered, their small voices filling the tense silence. And as he listened, Hank's world shifted on its axis. These were not just consequences of a past mistake. They were his children, his sons, his daughters. Just as this fragile truce began to form, the apartment door was thrown open with a thunderous bang. An imposing, silver-haired man stormed in, his face a mask of aristocratic outrage. It was Alistair Larson, Hank's grandfather and the formidable patriarch of the Larson Empire. "Hank, what is the meaning of this?" Luna called me, hysterical. "She said some woman was trying to trap you with the child." His tirade cut off as he took in the scene, not one, but 5 small children, all staring at him. Before the old man could fully process the shock, the children, far from being intimidated, broke into welcoming smiles. "Grandpa," they chorused, a wave of joyful sound that seemed to physically push the old man back a step. Alistair Larson, a man who could make stock markets tremble with a single word, was rendered speechless. His fury evaporated, replaced by stunned disbelief. He looked from the children to Hank, then to Lillian, his gaze accusatory. These are all great-grandchildren, grandfather," Hank said, rising to his feet. Alistair's formidable demeanor returned, though it was now tinged with a possessive pride. "This is unacceptable," he boomed, pointing a finger at Lillian. "These children are Larsons. They belong with us. I'll have my lawyers draft the paperwork. If you refuse to return them to the family, we will sue for full custody." Lillian paled, feeling the walls of her small world closing in. She was just one woman against the full might of the Larson dynasty. But then, something unexpected happened. Hank stepped forward, positioning himself squarely between his grandfather and Lillian. "That's enough, grandfather," he said, his tone calm but unyielding. "Luna sent you here to create a scene, and you've done it. She has been lying to both of us for a long time." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the children before landing back on his grandfather. "This is my family, my responsibility, and I will handle it." The words hung in the air, an unspoken declaration. My family. He had included her. He was defending her. Lillian stood frozen, caught in the crossfire of a powerful family's implosion. She had returned seeking justice, prepared to fight Hank Larson with every ounce of her strength. But as she watched him shield her from his own blood, a dizzying realization dawned. The lines of battle were blurring. The enemy she had spent 7 years hating might just be the only ally she had. The fight was far from over. But suddenly, she wasn't sure who she was fighting anymore. The morning sun, pale and promising, slanted through the vast windows of the penthouse, illuminating a scene of magnificent, unadulterated chaos. 7 years ago, mornings had been a silent, desperate scramble in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment, a fight against the clock and the gnawing fear of discovery. Now, life was a symphony, loud and occasionally off-key, but a symphony all the same. Lillian stood in the middle of the open-plan living area, a half-fastened cuff on her silk blouse, a sleek Larson Group design portfolio tucked under one arm. Before her, a whirlwind of 5 small bodies created a vortex of joyfulness. Leo, ever the miniature CEO in training, was directing his twin, Leo, on the optimal backpack packing strategy. Their voices a serious, high-pitched hum. Nina and Daisy, a blur of pink and pigtails, were engaged in a heated debate over whose turn it was to wear the unicorn-shaped barrettes. And in the center of it all was Mia, her dark eyes a startling echo of Hank's fixed on Lillian with a look of serene adoration. "Mommy, you can't go to work without fuel," Mia announced, marching forward with the unwavering purpose of a 5-year-old on a mission. She held a plate bearing a piece of toast, charred at the edges and slathered with a precarious mountain of strawberry jam. It was a culinary disaster, and to Lillian, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "My hero," Lillian said, her voice catching. She knelt, ignoring the potential for jam on her work attire, and accepted the offering. The toast was cold, the jam cloyingly sweet, but it tasted of victory. It tasted of a life she had fought for, a life she had once only dreamed of in the lonely, quiet nights. "We helped," Nina chirped, pointing a triumphant finger at the kitchen, where a trail of breadcrumbs led to an open jar of jam. Lillian's gaze followed the trail and landed on Hank. He wasn't the intimidating CEO of Larson Group in this moment. He was just Hank, his formidable suit swapped for a soft grey t-shirt, his hair endearingly mussed. A smudge of jam was on his cheek, and he was patiently trying to coax Daisy's foot into a stubborn sneaker. He looked up, his eyes finding Lillian's over the heads of their children, and a slow, private smile spread across his face. It was a smile that spoke of shared secrets and sleepless nights, of boardroom battles won and nightmare-plagued children soothed. It was a smile that had, over the past few months, completely dismantled the fortress around her heart. "Operation Morning Fuel is a success." "I see," he said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the childish chatter. He finally won the battle with the sneaker and stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. "A resounding success," Lillian confirmed, taking another bite of the toast. "Though I suspect our head of operations may have had some assistance." Hank's smile widened. He crossed the room in a few easy strides, his presence a warm, solid anchor in the morning storm. The children gravitated toward him, a cluster of planets orbiting their newfound sun. He was a natural, a fact that still sent a pang of wonder through Lillian. She had watched him fumble at first, his corporate precision useless against the unpredictable logic of a child. But he had learned, he had listened, he had shown up, every single time. He learned that Leo needed quiet praise, that Mia needed overt affection, and that Nina and Daisy operated as a single, glitter-fueled entity. He had earned his place here, not with his wealth or power, but with his patience and his unwavering commitment. "All right, team," Hank announced, clapping his hands together. "Final check." Teeth brushed, a chorus of "yes, Dad," rang out. The word, once so jarring, now felt as natural as breathing. "Backpacks ready." "Ready." "Homework sign." Leo held up a folder, already scanned and uploaded to the school portal. "Dad." "More efficient." Hank chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "Of course it is." He moved through them, a gentle whirlwind of last-minute adjustments, straightening a collar here, tying a shoelace there. He was a part of their world, woven so seamlessly into the fabric of their lives that Lillian found it hard to remember the gaping, father-shaped hole that had been there before. The warmth that had started in her chest when Mia handed her the toast spread through her limbs, chasing away the last vestiges of a long, cold winter. This was real. This wasn't a fragile truce, or a temporary arrangement for the sake of the children. This was a family, messy and loud and fiercely protective of its own. The fight for her mother's legacy, the battle to reclaim her name and her designs at Larson Group, had been the war. This was the peace. Winning had been about justice, about proving Lena's treachery and her own genius. But this felt like the true prize. Mommy, I love you," Daisy yelled, launching herself at Lillian for a final, crushing hug. One by one, they followed suit, a cascade of small arms, and whispered "I love yous. I love you all more than all the stars in the sky," she murmured into each head of hair, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Hank herded them toward the door where their driver was waiting. "Be good for Mrs. Gable," he called after them. He stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them go, a look of profound, unguarded love on his face. When the elevator doors slid shut, the sudden silence in the penthouse was deafening. He turned back to her, and the energy in the room shifted. The air, once crackling with familial chaos, now hummed with a different, more intimate frequency. He walked toward her, his eyes tracing the lines of her face as if memorizing them. He reached out and gently brushed a crumb from the corner of her lips. His touch was light, but it sent a jolt straight through her. "You have jam on your blouse," he said, his voice soft. Lillian looked down at the sticky red smear on the pristine white sill. "A casualty of war. A badge of honor," he corrected. He didn't move away. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. "You're an incredible mother, Lillian. I never get tired of watching you with them. You're not so bad yourself, Mr. Larson," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. She leaned into his touch, a silent surrender she would have thought impossible a year ago. For a ruthless CEO, his thumb stilled. All of that, the company, the deals, the legacy, it was all black and white. It made sense. Then you and the kids crashed into my life and brought all the color with you. He looked around the room, at the stray sock under the coffee table, the finger painting taped to the refrigerator, the bright pink unicorn left abandoned on his leather armchair. "My world was so quiet before. I didn't even realize how empty it was." The vulnerability in his voice undid her. This was the man beneath the legend, the man who had been just as lost as she was, in his own gilded cage. They had found their way back, not just to each other, but to themselves. "It wasn't quiet, Hank," she said softly, placing her hand over his. "It was silent." His eyes held hers, a universe of understanding passing between them. The past was a landscape of scars they both carried, his from a lonely childhood and a loveless engagement to her sister, hers from betrayal and the desperate flight into hiding. But here, in the quiet aftermath of their chaotic morning, those scars felt less like wounds and more like a map that had led them home. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "Lillian," he breathed her name like a prayer. "I know this isn't how fairy tales are supposed to go. They're not supposed to start 7 years late with 5 kids and a corporate scandal. Who needs fairy tales?" she whispered, eyes fluttering shut. "I like our story better." He pulled back just enough to look at her, a serious, searching light in his eyes. "Then let's write the next chapter together, for good." From his pocket, he pulled a small, velvet box. It wasn't a surprise. They had talked about it, in quiet moments after the children were asleep, but seeing it, feeling the weight of the promise it held, made her breath catch. He didn't get down on one knee. It wasn't their style. He simply opened the box. Inside, nestled on the velvet, was not a diamond, but a simple, elegant band of intertwined platinum and rose gold, a custom piece she recognized instantly. It was based on a sketch from her mother's old design book, a symbol of 2 lives weaving into one. "Marry me, Lillian," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Help me fill this quiet house with chaos and laughter for the rest of our lives." Tears welled in her eyes, blurring his handsome face. They weren't tears of sorrow or struggle, but of a joy so profound it was overwhelming. It was the culmination of every lonely night, every silent prayer, every ounce of strength she had mustered to protect her children. It was the ultimate payoff. It was home. "Yes," she whispered, the word a release, a promise, a beginning. "Yes, Hank, always. Yes."